for the first time and probably the only time this season, there is no Sunday games that's happening in the weekend action. There's going to be 2 Friday game and there's going to be 10 Saturday game. And that I think the reason why there's no Sunday game this week is because the All-Star game is going to be happening next Wednesday in Orlando City when the MLS All-Star taking on Atletico Madrid. And I think the league decided that they want to have that Sunday off for every single team so that they can get that one extra day rest. And also the fact that they also get an extra day to prepare for the next match week and also the All-Star game. So how nice of MLS decided to give everybody a day off. And also the fact that I'm pretty sure the other reason why there's no Sunday game is because they want all those players to have at least a good amount of rest on a short week to play in this All-Star game. And, I really do not like the fact that the All-Star game is in the middle of the week. And the reason why I think they're putting it in the middle of the week is because in a very congested MLS season like this season, there is really nowhere to put the All-Star game, and that we can't really sacrifice 1 week without MLS action if we're going to have a very congested season, and that this season has been shortened just to be dedicated for the All-Star game. But that being said, let's actually talk about this week's action first, and that before the All-Star break, we actually got some very big games that's coming this weekend, and also the fact that there are a couple of games that have a lot of playoff implication. And the first one that I'm going to be talking about is NYCFC. They are going to be taking on Sporting KC. NYCFC has a record of 8-8-3, while Sporting KC has a record of 6-7-8. NYCFC, of course, won 2-1 against Colorado, while Sporting KC lost 2-0 to FC Dallas at home. In terms of the top shots on goal leader, it's been a while since I have done this kind of stats, but Matrita leads that list with 51 shots on goal. Castellano with 41, Aber with 33, Morales with 33, and Alexander Ring also with 33 assists, or 33 shots on goal this season. For Sporting KC, Gutierrez leads the team with only 22 shots on goal this season. Nemeth with 16, Russell with 15, Croisset with 12, and Fernandez rounds off the list with 10 shots on goal this season. And, for Sporting KC, this is definitely a game that they want to at least get something out of it because, they're 5 points out of the playoffs, and we talk about how they are going to start a resurgence, and it looked like it kind of got going in the last couple of weeks with back-to-back win, only to basically getting halted by losing 2-0 against FC Dallas at home. And this one is definitely not an easy game to get points out of because they are going on the road against an NYCFC team that, although they're currently 5th in the standings, if you count the games in hand they have, which they have a lot of games in hand over the team that is above them, they theoretically could be at the top of the Eastern Conference. And that, while they have a lot of games in hand, it's also important the fact that we shall see how are they going to use those games in hand, and that, just because you have a lot of games in hand and that your points per game ratio is higher to other teams, those games in hand, as long as if you don't win those games in hand over other team, it doesn't really help you in terms of actually having a good points per game ratio. So, for NYCFC, they definitely want to win this one, and that maybe actually, this is not one of the games in hand that they have. I know that they're going to have a couple of games in hand in some of the midweek action that they're going to have. But, it'll be interesting to see where exactly this team is going to end up to, because throughout the season, they've been kind of near the 5th and 6th spot. And, I know that position isn't really a position that you would think NYCFC would be wanted to head in at the end of the season or heading into the playoffs, but with them having so much games in hand, it will be very interesting to see if they can take advantage of that and maybe get near the top of the Eastern Conference. But, for Sporting KC, they simply need to at least get a draw on this so that they can keep in the hunt hunt of the playoff race. And it's also why it's so important that they should have won the last game. Because if they won the last game, they would not be having this situation where they need to get a point out of this so that they can keep in the race. And that if they do lose this game, they're going to lose more ground to the playoff race that is currently in the Western Conference. But moving on, in the next match is probably the match of the week and the marquee match of this match week number 21 is LAFC versus Atlanta. And LAFC coming into this game still first in the Western Conference and still first in the Supporter Shield standing, despite the fact that they lost 3-2 against their hated rival LA Galaxy and in El Tráfico in the last match, as their record now is 14-4-3. While Atlanta, they won 2-0 to DC at home and improved their record to 11-3-8. Top shots leader, Vela currently leads the list with 103 shots on goal, which I believe that is the most shots on goal that anybody has got so far this season, which isn't a lot of surprise because it seemed like he usually takes a lot of shots on goal, and also most of those shots are usually ends up into the back of the net, as he is the leading goal scored in the league right now. While Rossi followed him with 69 shots on goal, Dio with 27, Ramirez with 27, and Mark Anthony Kay with also 27 to round up that list. For Atlanta, Joseph Martinez currently have 72 shots on goal, Gresso with 47, Pity Martinez with 46, Villalba with 27, and Ezekiel Barco with 20 shots on goal. Now, the last time both of these teams met was earlier last season, and Atlanta put an absolute spanking of LAFC and actually hand them their first ever loss in MLS with a 5-0 beatdown at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Something tells me it's not going to be 5-0 Atlanta in this game, and something tells me LAFC would definitely want some revenge after what happened last time because, obviously for LAFC, since this game is at home and that they all obviously are coming off of a loss, which every time when LAFC loses again, that the next couple of games they are going to be angry and they are going to be motivated in terms of trying to just roll over team and just put some ridiculous amount of goals and just put a ridiculous amount of number in the resort. But, I expect this to be a competitive match. I think LAFC would definitely be the favorites in this because of the fact that they're playing at home and that they are unbeatable at home, and that Bank of California Stadium is literally, I think, the hardest place to play in MLS besides Providence Park, of how not many team is able to go in there and able to even get a point out of. Well, Atlanta, this season they have been okay so far this season, but one of the thing that has really troubled them this season is the row. Their row record is absolutely abysmal this season, with them only winning 3 games so far on the road and have lost 7 matches so far this season on the road, and that the 7 of the 8 losses that they have this season has been on the road. So if you have a combination of Atlanta not doing very well on the road and LAFC doing very well at home, the script will say that LAFC should be able to win this comfortably. But still, I expect this to be a very competitive match, and it should I would definitely also expect there's going to be a lot of goals scored in this game because both of these teams are very good in terms of going for it on the attack. But moving on into the next match is New England. So the Revs are going to be taking on Orlando City. The Revs are 8-6-8, and and Orlando City record is 7-5-10. New England, of course, have the longest unbeaten streak right now in MLS with 10 games unbeaten, and that they haven't lost a match since the beginning of May. While Orlando City lost a heartbreaker one against the Redbulls 1-0. Well, I won't say it was a heartbreaker, but in many ways it was a very infuriating loss when they were by far the better team in that game, and they had the most chances of that game, and yet they just could not put the ball into the back of the net and caused them to lose 1-0 at home. Top shots leader for both of these teams, for New England, Carlos Gil leading that chart with 44 shots on goal so far this season. Bunbury is not far behind with 43, Pinea with 33, Agudelo with 30, and Juan Casado with 20 shots on goal this season to round out that list. For Orlando City, Dwyer currently leads that list with 43 shots on goal. Nani with 39, Mueller with 33, Akindele with 20, and Will Johnson also with 20 shots on goal to round off that list. And this one is kind of interesting because New England, they obviously have been one of those teams that is having just a crazy kind of run, and that they're one of those teams that just got off to a horrible start and now all of a sudden become good again, mainly because of the fact that they have a coaching change and also a front office change, and are heading into a new era that has really pretty much propelled this team as one of the best team in MLS right now. Although they're playing the Orlando City side that, they obviously are very desperate in terms of trying to get back in the conversation of potentially making the playoffs. I mean, they're kind of still in the conversation with them being 4 points back of New England for that final spot. And, this is a good opportunity for them to face against New England and trying to maybe go as much as 1 point behind them in terms of the playoff race. But yeah, New England is just red hot right now, and that it's going to definitely take a lot for them to be stopped. And the fact that, Orlando City, one thing I will say is this team does do much better on the road than they do at home, which is one of the most unusual kind of trends, because usually with an MLS team they usually do better at home than on the road. Orlando City is basically the opposite, where they have actually shown that they can get resort on the road. So, I won't be surprised if they get a resort against New England, and knowing the fact that this is a big opportunity for them to, face an opponent that they're going to fight for those playoff spots, and that this could be a game that maybe would decide whether or not if they can make the playoffs or not. Maybe they, of course, will be up for it, and that New England's got to be careful, and the fact that this Orlando City side can definitely be a very dangerous side, even though they, of course, are the road team. But moving on, in the next match is the Redbulls. So they are playing against the Columbus Crew. The Redbulls have a record of 10-4-8, while the Crew has a 6-3-14 record. The Redbulls, of course, won 1-0 against Orlando City. As I mentioned, it was kind of a lucky win for them because they didn't really play very well, and the only reason why they were able to get all 3 points was because of the fact that Orlando City just could not finish in that game. While Columbus actually won their first game in what seems like forever, when they beat Montreal at home 2-1, and that they have once again decided to add more players in the transfer window. And I think right now Columbus, doing this transfer window, they are probably the most active team in the transfer window right now. I mean, there's been a lot of signings that Columbus has been making, and I definitely understand why exactly they're trying to bring in a lot of guys into this squad in this transfer window, because they're in a rebuilding year right now, and that they want to rebuild so that they can get back to the level that they were a couple of years ago. And hopefully some of these guys that they just bought from the transfer window and some of the trades that they have done during this transfer window will work out for them. But in terms of the top shots leader for the Redbulls, Royer currently leads that list for the Redbulls with 43, Kaku with 21, Ivan and Brian White both at 20 shots on goal so far this season, and BWP rounds up that list with 19 shots on goal this season. For Columbus, Pedro Santos leads that list with 43 shots on goal so far, Zardes with 35, Rubinho with 33, Higuain with 19, and Guzman with 11 shots on goal for this team. And I would say the Red Bulls should be able to win this game. I mean, I know Columbus had added a couple of players on the attack and also in the defense to trying to help their rebuild and trying to salvage something for the latter part of the season. I think the Red Bulls should be able to have enough, and especially the fact that they're playing at home against a weaker opponent. I think the Red Bulls should be able to win this one, and that I think this is one of those games that it's kind of straightforward that you know who is going to win that game. And that's no disrespect to Columbus, and obviously for Columbus they can still win this. if they of course caught the Redbulls napping, which sometimes the Redbulls this season we have seen where they do sometimes get caught napping, and that when they face against an inferior team, they tends to be a little bit more relaxed and tends to not really be very up for it as they would be if they were facing a much tougher opponents. But still, I expect the Red Bulls should be able to get all 3 points against a Columbus side that is clearly rebuilding right now. But moving on into the next match is Chicago. So they are going to be playing against DC, and the struggling Chicago Fire currently has a record of 5-8-10, while DC currently has a record of 9-8-6. Chicago, of course, won one game in 11 matches, which also further explain why they are just struggling right now, and that, no pun intended, but they are really a tire fire right now with the way that it's going right now. Well, for DC, of course, they lost 2-0 to Atlanta away. They themselves are not really looking as good as they have been throughout the season. While for the top shots leader for Chicago, Katai actually leads that chart with 81 shots on goal, which is definitely a very high number, and I think he probably is one of the guys that is right up there in the top 5 list of the amount of shots on goal a player was able to get so far this season. But unlike most of those players that has a high amount of shots on goal, most of the shots on goal that Katai has does not end up into the back of the net. CJ Sapong currently have 48, Nikolic with 32, Frankowski with 28, and Gaitan rounds up the list with 24 shots on goal. For DC, Rooney leads that chart with 71 shots on goal, Acosta with 40, Ariola with 28, Rodriguez with 25, and Leandro Jara rounds up that list with 24 shots on goal. And for DC, this is simply a game that they have to win. I mean, right now, the Chicago Fire, I just think that they're done in terms of the way that they refuse to, like, unless if the Fire finally realize that their front office situation is very dire and that somebody needs to be let go in that front office, and also they need to have a coaching change because Paunovic is definitely have lost the dressing room and have lost a lot of the trust the player, of course, want to show them, and it's clearly shown that the players are just not playing for him anymore. And unless if there's no change in terms of the front office and also the coaching, I just think Chicago is done. And the fact that I don't think this team is actually even get anywhere near in terms of making the playoffs. But having said that, for DC, this is where you got to take advantage of it, and the fact that you got to win against a team that is struggling right now and not doing very well in the league, and trying to get some points so that you can stay in the top part of the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference right now has really bunched up with the fact that the team at first place, which is the Union, and the team in 7th place, which is currently owned by New England, is only separated by just 9 points right now. And the fact that you know, if you're going to have a bad run of form during the remaining of the season, if you're an Eastern Conference team, yeah, this could really doom your season, and that you could actually find yourself, like even the top teams, if they have a bad run of form, you could definitely find yourself going near the bottom of the, or near drop out of the red line because of the fact that how tight the Eastern Conference has been on. But that being said, you know, as I said before with DC, they got to win this. This is a very winnable game for them, and especially that they didn't get a point out of Atlanta in the last match. You would think that this has got to be a must-win for DC in this match. But moving on, in the next match, and the last match on this board before I switch the board, is Dallas. They play against RSL in a very important game that has a lot of playoff implication in the Western Conference. The reason being is because Dallas currently have a record of 9-5-8. They of course won 2-0 against SKC on the road, which is a massive victory for Dallas and for a team that usually do not do well on the road this season, and that they currently owns the 6th spot right now in the Western Conference, while RSL currently have a record of 9-3-9. They of course drew 1-1 against Minnesota at home, which, in some way, I guess it's a good result considering the fact that they were facing one of those teams that they're fighting for playoff position, and that playoff team that they're fighting for playoff position has been red hot lately. But having said that, they drop point at home, which is something they cannot afford to do when they are a team that do not do well on the road. Although now they, of course, have to make sure that they need to try to do better on the road, because they're facing a Dallas team who, both of these teams are only separated by 2 points, and that, if RSL does lose this game, then they can definitely find themselves going below the red line. I believe if Houston, of course, win this week, and that RSL, of course, lose this match, then RSL would be back below the red line. Like right now, it's basically hot potato in terms of the Western Conference, and it's almost like just a pendulum in terms of the Western Conference playoff race, with teams that is just so bunched up right now near the red line, and that if you have one bad result and that the other team, of course, win, then you will basically sunk down and go below the red line. So yeah, for both of these teams, they definitely want to get a win so that they can avoid that scenario of finding themselves below the red line. Obviously, I think Dallas is going to be favorites in this game because, as I mentioned, RSL has not done very well so far this season on the road, and Dallas has been very good at home. But in such a big game like this, I expect both teams will really be up for it, and that it's going to definitely be a fight in terms of trying to get those crucial points so that they can, of course, stay above the red line until next week. But that being said, I am now going to be switching the boards and look at the last 6 games that's going to be happening in MLS Matchweek number 21. But yeah, next up, look, speaking of Houston, just a moment ago, guess who I am previewing next? That's right, it's the Houston Dynamo taking on the Seattle Sounders in this match. The Dynamo, of course, have a record of 9-3-9, while Seattle has a record of 10-5-6. Houston, of course, won 3-1 on the road, which is only their second road win this season, and one of the rarest road wins that they have got so far this season. While Seattle, of course, lost 2-1 in the Cascadia Derby against the Portland Timbers at home. Top shots on goal leader for Houston, Manotas leads that chart with 58 shots on goal. Elise with 50, Martinez with 37, Rodriguez with 29, and Kyoto with 24 shots on goal to round off that list. For Seattle, Ruidiaz with 38 shots on goal leads the chart, Ladero with 32, Ship with 25, Rodriguez with 21, and Jordan Morris rounds up that chart with 16 shots on goal. Now, since this is a home game for the Dynamo, you know that they have to win this game because, despite the fact that they did win on the road against TFC, I doubt that they would actually win another road game, or maybe win a couple of more road games. And keep in mind, this road game against TFC that they won, I would put a little bit of an asterisk in terms of this road win because of the fact that they weren't facing a strong TFC team, and that they of course were facing a much weaker TFC team. And every time when a weaker TFC team face against an opponent, usually the opponent always gets a win. But having said that, Elise wasn't available in that game, so I guess maybe I shouldn't put an asterisk in terms of that. But the good news is Elise is back in this game against the Sounders, and yeah, this is definitely not an easy opponent to make sure you can get a win at home. And the Sounders themselves, obviously they're not happy after losing the Cascadia Derby in the last match, and despite the fact that a lot of people say that the Sounders are going to make the playoffs, and I know for a fact that most likely they're one of those teams that is going to make the playoffs in the Western Conference, they're only 5 points above the red line right now. And if they have a little bit of a cold streak, then they could definitely find themselves in a bit of a trouble in terms of actually staying above the red line. And that this is definitely one of the games that can maybe help their cases of trying to go further away from the red line. I mean, I'm not trying to scare Sounders fan. The fact that you guys are if you guys are pretty close to the red line, and the fact that if you don't start winning games, then you could fall out of it. But just in some way, I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of a warning. The fact that they're not like a million miles away, and that they're for sure is going to make the playoffs, and that they still need to win their games. And this one is a game that they can definitely win, although it is on the road against a Houston side that has treated their home field advantage like it's their only source of winning and only way to actually make it to the playoffs this season. So yeah, this will definitely be a very interesting game, and that, you know, if the Dynamo does not win this home game, then yeah, that away win, I mean, that road victory kind of made up for their loss against LAFC at home about a week ago. But still, you know, if they lose this one against Seattle, then yeah, that means that once again they drop points on at home, which is something that they desperately cannot do if they want to make the playoffs this season. But moving on, in the next match is Minnesota. So the Loons are playing against the worst team in the league, that is Vancouver Whitecaps. And the Whitecaps, despite the fact that they don't actually have like the least amount of points, the reason why I say they have the worst record is because they have the fewest wins, and I think they actually don't have the most loss because of the fact that they drew 8 times so far this season. But yeah, it is a very ugly record that the Whitecaps had, with a 4-8-11 record. While Minnesota, their record is 10-4-7, and both of these teams are pretty much heading in opposite direction. And you could say that this is the bipolar derby between both of these teams, because with Minnesota, they are definitely right on the high, and that they are upping their stocks with going unbeaten in 8 games, although they did have their winning streak comes to an end in that game against RSL where they drew 1-1. While Vancouver, yeah, they are winless in 8 games, and it would be 9 games if you would have counted that their embarrassing midweek loss against Calgary FC in the Canadian Championship. And that, yeah, it is full on crisis right now with the Whitecaps situation. For the top shots leader for Vancouver, Montreal currently leads that list with 39 shots on goal. Reyna is not far behind him with 37. Imbong Kwan with 36 shots on goal. Nan with 28, and Benito with 14 shots on goal to round up that list. For Minnesota, Quintero currently leads that chart with 50 shots on goal. Rodriguez with 38, Gregish with 29, Finley with 18, and Ibarra with 18 shots on goal for Minnesota to round up the shots leader. And, you know, this is one of those games that is pretty straightforward. I mean, unless if something crazy happens, and then unless if this is something that we've seen before with MLS, where somehow the underdog team put a big surprise to one of the heavy favorites team to get a victory, I don't think Minnesota should have a lot of problem with the Whitecaps, especially how good Minnesota has been in these last couple of games against a team that is just in a huge turmoil, with the way that the fans are absolutely pissed off of how the ownership and also the front office is running the team to the ground. I expect Minnesota should get all 3 points in this one, and that this should be a straightforward result. And that if Vancouver does win this game, I think this would definitely be one of the biggest shocks we have seen so far in the regular season. But that being said, moving on into the next match is Montreal. So Montreal is playing against the Union, and Montreal is definitely struggling right now. They, of course, lost 2-1 to Columbus away to now drop themselves into 6th place in the Eastern Conference, while Philly, of course, won 2-0 to Chicago at home. Now, the good news for Montreal is that Nacho Piatti is back on this team. He played in the Canadian Championship game, and that he actually played the full 90 minutes, and he also scored a goal in that game, which is huge for Montreal, not only in terms of them moving on into the Canadian Championship semifinal, but the fact that Piatti is definitely back in form, and they desperately need Piatti to be back in form with this team, considering the fact that they are definitely struggling right now without him, and that, without him in the squad, this team is gonna just continue to head into this little tailspin that they are going right now. Well, for the top shots leader for both of these teams, for Montreal, Taider currently leads that list with 48 shots on goal. Okwanko with 37, Urruti with 32, Omar Brownlee with 16, and Jackson Hemo with 16 shots on goal. For Philly, Shabilko currently leads that chart with 52, Pico with 42, Fabian with 40, Montero with 35, and Aronson with 27 shots on goal. And that, the good news, as I said, with Montreal, they got Piatti back in this game. The bad news is they're playing against the Union, and the Union are very good this season on the road, and that they are a team that is currently in first place and trying to get a couple of wins to solidify their spot in the top of the Eastern Conference. So yeah, this is definitely not going to be an easy task for Montreal, and even with Piatti back in the squad, I know he played the full 90 minutes and he did score a goal in that Canadian Championship game, but they were playing against a Canadian Premier League team, which I'm not going to disrespect the Canadian Premier League and the fact that that league is definitely a decent league, and that we already saw an upset with Calgary from the Canadian Premier League knocking off an MLS team. But he is going to, for the first time, get a full 90 minutes reps in MLS, where I think it's going to be more intensive, and that he is going to be facing against the team that is currently first in the Eastern Conference. So it's a complete different animal, and I don't know if Piatti, obviously they said that he's 100% healthy, but this is his first game back in MLS, and that we shall see if that rust would be a factor. I mean, it wasn't a factor in the Canadian Championship game because the fact he scored a goal, but would it be a factor when it comes to league plays? But moving on into the next match is TFC. So TFC, of course, is playing against FC Cincinnati. TFC record is now 8-5-9, and they lost that embarrassing home game against Houston 3-1 to drop them below the red line for the first time this season. While they're playing against an FC Cincinnati team that is pretty much just folding this season, and one of those teams that is probably out of the playoffs because they have a record of 5-2-15, and they actually have the most loss so far this season and has the fewest points in MLS this season, and they lost 2-0 against New England at home in the last match. Now, top shots on goal leader for TFC, Pozuelo currently leads that list with 48, De Leon with 35, Altidore with 30, Delgado with 26, and Hamilton rounds up that chart with 23 shots on goal leader. For FC Cincinnati, Kakuta Mane currently leads that chart with 26 shots on goal, Alan Cruz with 21, Audi with 20, Maddox with 18, and Ledesma also with 18 shots on goal to round off that chart. And for TFC, obviously this is a must-win for them, because what happened last game where Greg Vanney decided to take a big gamble in terms of starting his weaker squad. Obviously that gamble didn't pay off, and that really triggered a lot of angry TFC fans that continue to want Vanney to be fired from this team, and that definitely that gamble that he took was just a dumb kind of gamble, considering the fact that they didn't have to play in a Canadian Championship game like the other Canadian team that has to be involved, and that they don't have a midweek game. And yeah, this is a must-win game for them for a chance to either go above the red line once again, depending on if New England, of course, win their match, or they keep pace with some of the teams that they're fighting for the playoffs. And that this is one of those games that if they lose this one, then I do have a lot of concern with TFC in terms of their chances of making the playoffs. Like, really, losing at home to FC Cincinnati, and if Greg Vanney decided to rest his guys for this game, then I'm honestly, like I think TFC fan will just completely lose their mind, and they're gonna have a big meltdown with the way that why in the world do you decide to rest your player after you basically rest those same players just a week ago against Houston, and it did not work at all. So yeah, we shall see how this game, of course, will turn out. But moving on into the next match is the Quakes. So the Red Hot Quakes is playing against the Rapids, and the Red Hot Quakes are currently 10-4-7, and they have won 5 out of their last 6 games. And the last 2 games that the Quakes, of course, have won was a combined of 6 goals to 2. And in terms of the shots, yeah, they outshot their opponent in the last 2 games. Get this, 64-11. 64-11 is the amount that they have outshot their opponent. I mean, that is some Man City level kind of outshooting that the Quakes have been doing in these last 2 games. And the more surprising thing about that stat line is the fact that they did that on the road too, which makes it even more shocking with the way that the Quakes have never been a team that has been very good on the road. Now, they're playing against a Rapid team that it has a record of 5-5-11, and they did lose 2-1 against NYC at home, and that Colorado have definitely started to lose some of that momentum that they had back in June when they were on a good unbeaten run to get back into the playoff race, and that, you know, they still have a chance to get back in the playoff race if they can start a run again. But I don't think that will happen against a Quakes team that, like I said, is basically playing out of their mind, and that this team, the way that I've been seeing this team play in these last couple of weeks, not only they have just got getting better and better, but they are approaching to a level that I only see few teams in this league actually approach, and that they are literally right there almost to LAFC level with the way that how they have just been dominating opponent. Now, obviously, I know some people will just say, well, you know, they were facing a weak Vancouver team that was in crisis, and they were facing against a Galaxy that didn't really care about that match. But still, at the end of the day, when you outshot your opponent by that much, and the way that they just dominate their opponent like that in the last 2 games, that is something I rarely see in this league. And especially with this league being the fact that parity, you know, I know there's been a lot of discussion whether parity still exists with this league. Oh yeah, it definitely exists. And the fact that the margin between some of these teams are not really that much, and that even the worst team in the league facing against the best team in the league, you know, some crazy things can happen, which is why we always say when there's a big upset, that's just so MLS, because that is something that we have seen a lot happening. Now, I'm not saying that this could happen in this game, and the fact that the Rapids had absolutely or the fact that the Rapids have absolutely no chance in this. And, you know, looking at the shots leader, since we are talking about shots, Vaco at 68 shots to lead the team, Espinoza with 61, Eriksson with 49, Vondo with 45, and Huson with 37 shots to rounds off the list. For Colorado, Kamara with 60 shots to lead the team, Mesquita with 47, Shinishiki with 28, Rubio with 26, and Nicholson with 21 shots on goal. And, you know, like I said, I think this, like the Minnesota versus Vancouver game, I think the Quakes should be able to win this game, and that, you know, I don't expect this to be a blowout for the Quakes, because I know for a fact that Colorado is going to bunker, and that's been one of the things that they actually have been pretty successful this season in some of their wins and doing the unbeaten run, where they were very good in terms of bunkering, and they are a very good counter-attacking team. And one thing that the Quakes have been having issue in the past, and one of the things that I do see sometime with this team that have trouble with, is trying to break down a bunker and also getting caught on the counter attack. So yeah, I don't expect us to just completely blow this team out of the door like we did against Vancouver and the Galaxy. I mean, if they do that, then yeah, I would really question the fact that is this just a good run that they are on, or is this team actually MLS Cup contender right now with the way that they've been playing? Because it's incredible. Like, seen this team play week in and week out, and the way that they have just played some of the most beautiful soccer and some men's city level kind of soccer is just unheard of and just completely out of my imagination. So yeah, hopefully of course we win against the Rapids, and the fact that, you know, we can get 3 points and continue to climb up the table. But finally, heading into the last game of this week is another big one, and I think besides the LAFC versus Atlanta game, this one could also be a big marquee matchup, because both of these teams, Portland and the Galaxy, are coming off with big derby wins. Portland, of course, coming off with a 2-1 win against Seattle away in the Cascadia Derby to improve their record to 8-4-8. While the Galaxy, they, of course, got a big win against LAFC 3-2 at home and improved their record to 12-1-8, and I believe they're now back into second place in the Western Conference. Top shots leader for both of these teams. For Portland, Blanco leads that list with 58 shots on goal, Valeri with 48, Brian Fernandez with 34, Ebobisi with 30, and Paredes with 20 shots on goal. For the Galaxy, Zlatan currently have 78 shots on goal to lead this team. Then you got Antuna with 23, Leggett with 18, Pontius with 17, and Alvarez to rounds up the chart with 16 shots on goal, and that's Fabio Alvarez. That is currently fifth in the chart for the top shots leader for the Galaxy. And yeah, this is definitely, you know, both of these teams are definitely feeling the high after their derby wins, and that, you know, they definitely want to continue to trying to improve after their big derby wins in the previous weekend. You know, certainly Portland, since they're playing at home, they are all, like, every time when Portland plays at home, I would consider them being the favorites in this game, considering the fact that they've been very good at home. Although the last two home game for Portland hasn't really worked out because they drew in their last two matches, and they're playing against a Galaxy team that has done pretty well on the road, and it's been kind of a theme for this Galaxy team where for some reason they don't tend to do well at home, but they tend to do well on the road. And the other thing that I also realized is that, you know, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, of how, you know, he, of course, obviously he had that controversial kind of ending with him elbowing El Munir, and the fact that everybody are pissed off the fact that he did not get suspended and that he shouldn't be playing this game. Well, you know, one thing I will say is that besides the whole suspension situation, I have a feeling he might show up in this game, because it seemed like Zlatan throughout this season, most of the time when he is the most effective and most of the time when he actually show up and help this team is in these big games. And that in this game is a classic example of a big game that I know Zlatan is going to be showed up, and he's definitely going to be up for it. And it seemed like whenever, if he's up for it, the Galaxy are a dangerous team, and probably the most dangerous team in the league right now. But that being said, Portland themselves also have their own goal scored in Brian Fernandez, and like the LAFC versus Atlanta game, I expect this one to potentially be a very high scoring kind of affair, because both of these teams have very good attack and both of these teams can score a lot of goals. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this match, of course, would go, and also very interesting to see what these 12 matches is going to go for MLS Match Week number 21, as we have now reached the end of another episode of Preview, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. As usual, let me know in the comments below what do you think of these games, and leave your prediction below. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and despite the fact that we don't have a Sunday action this week, I'm still going to be doing the review on that that Sunday, even there's no game that happened on that day. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.